I do not care if they're family members. I do not care how long you've known them. I don't care about the history that you share. Your mental health and emotional well-being matter more than preserving a toxic relationship. Welcome to the Kindest, Extremist podcast. I'm your host, Shola Richards, aka Brother Teresa. I've spoken to tens of thousands of people all over the world about the importance of kindness. And I am obsessed with how we can bring more kindness into our daily lives and restore balance to a deeply unbalanced world. Every episode, I'll give you 3 practical strategies to create a kinder world, and I'll do it in 30 minutes or less. No fluff, just valuable, actionable content that you can implement in your life immediately after listening to help you actively create a kinder world. There's no time to waste. Let's dive in. What's up, my friend? Welcome back for episode 33 of the Kindest Extremist podcast. I'm your host, Shola Richards, aka Brother Teresa. Today, we're diving into something that affects so many of us, but that we often struggle to name: toxic relationships. Look, y'all, I've identified 6 critical traits that you can use as your personal checklist to determine if you're in a toxic relationship. And I'm so excited to share these traits with you. And because this topic is so important, because there's so much ground to cover, this episode is the first part of a special 2-part series on how to recognize a toxic relationship. I'm going to cover the first 3 toxic traits in this episode 33. I'm going to drop part 2 of this series with the remaining 3 toxic traits next week in episode 34. Now, before we go any further, I need to be crystal clear about what we're talking about here. When I say toxic relationship, I'm not just referring to romantic partnerships. I'm talking about any relationship in your life: friendships, family members, coworkers, even people in your community. These relationships drain the life out of you, and they make kindness feel impossible because you're spending all of your energy just trying to survive the interaction. Here's the thing, and this is important. Sadly, toxic people are everywhere. As mentioned, they're in our families, our workplaces, our social circles, and sometimes, if we're going to be honest, keep it real, we might even be that toxic person to someone else. Ouch, right? This is personal for me, fam, because I've been in toxic relationships, and I'm ashamed to admit that I've been the toxic person in some relationships too. So trust me when I say this, I get it. This work is hard, but it's necessary. I'm 51 years old, and I've had the pleasure of meeting and working with many thousands of people from all over the world. And thankfully, the overwhelming majority of those people were lovely, kind, and well-adjusted humans. However, a small percentage of them were not. And I'm going to be sharing those stories in this episode and in part 2 next week. And in full transparency, the names and some details have been changed to protect people's privacy. Okay, there's so much to get into here. So let's begin the journey together with realness, with kindness, and most importantly, practical solutions. Are you ready to detoxify your relationships? If so, let's dive in. The first sign that a person or a relationship may be toxic is because they drain your energy every time you interact with them. Let me start with a personal story that still kind of stings a little. Years ago, I had a friend, let's call him Jimmy, who I'd known since college. We had history together, shared memories, and I genuinely cared about the dude. But here's the thing. Every single time I saw Jimmy's name pop up on my phone, my stomach would drop. And I mean every single time. It didn't matter if it was a text, a call, or even seeing that he commented on one of my social media posts. I felt an immediate wave of dread wash over me. Why? Because I knew that this interaction was going to leave me feeling worse than I did before it happened. Jimmy was what I call an energy vampire. You know the type, right? The moment they enter your space, it's like they plug a hose directly into your soul and start draining every ounce of positivity and peace you have. Every conversation with Jimmy followed the same exhausting pattern. He'd complain about his job, his relationship, his family, his health, his finances. Basically, everything in his life was terrible, and he needed me to know about it in excruciating detail. But here's the kicker. Whenever I tried to offer suggestions or help him problem solve, he'd shoot down every single idea. Nothing would work. Nothing could possibly help. The situation was hopeless, and I just didn't understand. After hanging up the phone or walking away from a conversation with Jimmy, I just feel completely depleted, like I just run a marathon while carrying a refrigerator on my back. Now, to be clear about something important, we all have difficult seasons in our lives where we need extra support from our friends and our loved ones. That's normal, and that's human, and that's what relationships are for. Here's the difference, and this is very important that you get this. Toxic people make draining you their lifestyle, not just a temporary season. Let's break down what energy draining relationships actually look like, because it's more nuanced than just someone being negative. First, there's what's called conversational imbalance. It's where every conversation becomes about them, their problems, their drama, and their needs. You could just share that you just got promoted at work, and within 30 seconds, they've redirected the conversation back to themselves. I remember one time when I was genuinely excited to tell Jimmy about a keynote speech that I was invited to deliver. I'd been working towards this opportunity for years. His response? That's cool, man. Hey, anyway, let me tell you about this nightmare situation at my job. And just like that, my moment was gone. Second, there's emotional dumping without reciprocity. They treat you like an emotional landfill, dropping all their problems, their fears, and frustration on you. But when you need support, suddenly they're too busy, too stressed, or they minimize what you've been going through. Third, there's crisis addiction. Their life is perpetually in crisis mode. There's always some emergency, some drama, some catastrophe that requires their immediate attention and emotional labor. But here's what makes this so tricky. Many of us have been taught that being a good friend, a good family member, or a good person means being endlessly available to others, regardless of how it affects us. We've been sold this lie that setting boundaries with draining people makes us selfish or unkind. First of all, that is complete BS, and it's a lie that keeps us trapped in toxic relationships. Real kindness, the kind of kindness that I advocate for on this podcast, includes being kind to yourself. And sometimes being kind to yourself means protecting your energy from people who would try to drain you dry. Now, I want to address something else that's important here. How do you know if someone is genuinely going through a hard time and needs support versus someone who's toxic and draining? Here is the distinction. People going through a hard time will eventually show signs of trying to improve their situation. They'll take your advice. They'll make efforts to change. They'll show appreciation for your support. Even if progress is slow, you can see that they're trying. Toxic people, on the other hand, seem invested in staying stuck. They reject help. They refuse to take responsibility, and they almost seem comfortable in their misery as long as they have an audience for it. So let me share what happened with Jimmy. After months of feeling depleted after every interaction, I finally had to have an honest conversation with the dude. I told him that I cared about him, but our interactions were affecting my well-being. You know what he said? Wow, I didn't realize that you're so selfish. I thought you were my friend. And that right there told me everything I needed to know. A person who genuinely cares about you will be concerned to learn that they're hurting you. A toxic person will make you the villain for pointing it out. I eventually had to distance myself from Jimmy. It was painful and it felt like a failure, if I'm gonna be honest, because for a while I grieved the friendship, but I immediately felt lighter. I felt like I could breathe again. So here's your first practical kindness strategy of this episode. I want you to do what I call an energy audit of your relationships. Over the next week, pay attention to how you feel after interacting with the people in your life, not during the interaction, after it. Keep a simple note on your phone, and after each significant interaction, jot down the person's name, how you felt before the interaction, like engaged, neutral, tired, whatever, and then how you felt after the interaction. At the end of the week, review your notes. You're looking for patterns. Are there people who consistently leave you feeling drained, depleted, or emotionally exhausted? If so, that's valuable information. It doesn't necessarily mean that you need to cut them off immediately and kick them to the curb, but it does mean that you need to make some intentional choices about how much access they have to your finite energy. Remember, you can't pour from an empty cup. Protecting your energy isn't selfish. It's essential for your ability to show up as your best self in all of your relationships. The second sign that a person or a relationship may be toxic is that they refuse to take responsibility and they never apologize. Let's talk about accountability, or more specifically, the complete lack of it in toxic relationships. I want to share a story about someone who I used to work with. I'm going to call her Sandra, okay? So Sandra was actually pretty good at her job, but she had one glaring problem. She was utterly incapable of admitting when she was wrong. I mean, utterly incapable. I remember this one incident where Sandra sent out an email to her entire department with incorrect information about a policy change. This mistake was not a big deal, to be clear. These things happen. We all make mistakes, but it caused some confusion and few people made decisions based on that incorrect information. When our manager gently pointed out the error and asked Sandra to send a correction, do you know what she did? She blamed the IT department for, air quotes, obviously sending out the wrong version of her email. Then she blamed our manager for not giving her clear instructions in the first place. Then she blamed the policy itself for being unnecessarily confusing. Do you know what she didn't do? Admit that she made a mistake and apologize. Seriously, it is wild to me how hard this is for some people to do. This is one of the clearest markers of a toxic person. They will perform Olympic-level mental gymnastics to avoid taking responsibility for their actions. Let's break down what this looks like in different forms. First, there's the deflector. This is someone, I'm sure you're familiar with all these types of people. This is someone who, when confronted with their behavior, immediately turns it around on you. I wouldn't have yelled at you if you hadn't made me so angry. Or, I only said that because you hurt me first. Notice the pattern? Their actions are always someone else's fault. Always. Second, there's the gaslighter. This person not only refuses to take responsibility, but they'll actually try to convince you that the thing that you know happened didn't happen. They'll say, I never said that. Or, you're remembering it wrong. Or, you're being too sensitive. They'll make you question your own reality instead of simply saying, you know what, you're right. I did say that and I'm sorry. Third, there's the victim player. This is when you try to address their hurtful behavior, they immediately flip the script and make themselves the victim. I can't believe you're attacking me like this. Or, why are you always picking on me? Or, you're so mean to me. Suddenly, you're comforting them for the hurt they caused you. How wild is this? But here's the thing, regardless of the struggles that someone may be dealing with, while understandable, it doesn't give them a free pass to hurt you repeatedly without accountability. You know what responsible people do when they mess up? They own it. They apologize. They try to make it right. And then they work on not repeating the same mistake again. It's really that simple. So let's get back to my situation with Sandra at work. After months of watching her blame everyone else for her mistakes, I finally found myself in a situation where her refusal to take responsibility directly affected me. She had promised to complete a report that I needed for a presentation. She didn't do it. So when I asked her about it, she told me, you should have reminded me. And if it was so important to you, then you should have just done it yourself. What? Yeah, no apology, no acknowledgement that she dropped the ball, just blame directed at me. I realized in that moment I had a choice. I could keep trying to maintain a working relationship with someone who would never take responsibility for their actions, or I could create some serious professional boundaries. I chose boundaries. From that point forward, I documented every request I made of Sandra in writing. I created backup plans that didn't rely on her follow-through. I stopped expecting her to be accountable because she had shown me repeatedly that accountability was not in her wheelhouse. This wasn't ideal. It was a lot of extra work for me, but it protected me from being blindsided by her nonsense. Here's something crucial that I want you to understand. A person who won't apologize or take responsibility is telling you something very important about who they are. Believe them. This isn't about holding grudges or expecting perfection. We all mess up. We hurt people sometimes. That's part of being human. When someone shows you a pattern of refusing to own their own mistakes, refusing to apologize, and consistently blaming others for their behavior, that's not someone who's going to change without serious intervention. Even then, sad to say, change is unlikely unless they actually want to change. While this is a workplace example, similar examples can happen with friends, family members too. Here's what I want you to know. You are not required to maintain a close relationship with someone who repeatedly hurts you and refuses to take responsibility for it. I do not care if they're family members. I do not care how long you've known them. I don't care about the history that you share. Your mental health and emotional well-being matter more than preserving a toxic relationship. So with that said, here's your second practical kindness strategy of the episode. I want you to do what I call the accountability assessment for the people in your life who you might suspect could be toxic. Ask yourself these 4 questions about the person. 1, when was the last time they genuinely apologized for something that they did wrong? Not a non-apology like, I'm sorry you feel that way, but a real apology that acknowledges their actions and their impact. 2, when you brought up concerns about the behavior, how'd they respond? Did they get defensive? Did they blame you? Or did they actually listen and try to do better? 3, did they show a pattern of everyone else being the problem but never themselves? And 4, have they ever thanked you for pointing out a blind spot or helping them grow? Or do they always react negatively to feedback? Be honest with your answers. Write them down if it helps. If you're finding that someone consistently fails these questions, if they never genuinely apologize, always deflect responsibility, and react defensively to any feedback, that's critical information about whether this relationship is healthy for you. Remember, everyone messes up sometimes, but toxic people make refusing to take responsibility a lifestyle choice. Hey, fellow kindness extremists, it's me, Shola. If you're picking up what I'm putting down, if you're mowing what I'm growing, if you're smelling what I'm stepping in. Okay, I'll stop. If you're enjoying what you're listening to so far, I would love it if you would take a moment to hit the subscribe button and leave a rating and a review. Those incredibly kind acts go so far in helping me to reach as many people as possible who will join the movement to actively create a kinder world. I appreciate you so much, my friend. Okay, let's get back to the episode. All right, let's talk about the third warning sign of a toxic relationship. They're chronically negative and reject solutions. This one hits particularly hard for me because I've been guilty of doing this myself during some really dark periods in my life. Let me paint you a picture. Have you ever tried to help someone solve a problem only to have them shoot down every single suggestion you make? For example, Hey, have you tried talking to the person about it? Them. That won't work. Or, hey, what if you approach it this way? Them. I already thought of that. It's impossible. Or, hey, maybe you could. Them. Look, you don't understand. Nothing will help. It's exhausting, right? Here's the thing about chronically negative people who reject solutions. They're not actually looking for help. They're looking for an audience for their misery. Now, let me be very clear about what I'm not talking about here. I am not talking about people going through depression or any other mental health challenges. I know this intimately. Depression is a very real illness that affects how our brains process information, and people dealing with depression deserve compassion and professional support, not our judgment. What I am talking about is a specific behavior pattern where someone has made negativity their identity and actively resists any attempt to improve their situation. Let me tell you about my former colleague. Let's call her Rebecca. Rebecca worked in a nearby cubicle, and every single day, and I mean every single day, she had something to complain about. The office was too cold, then it was too hot, the coffee was terrible, the parking lot was too far away, her computer was slow, her workload was too heavy, then all of a sudden her workload was too light and boring. At first, I tried to be helpful. I'm a problem solver by nature, so I'd offer suggestions. Hey, maybe you could consider bringing in a sweater for when the AC is too cold. She's like, I shouldn't have to. They should just fix the temperature. Hey, have you ever tried bringing your own coffee from home? She's like, I shouldn't have to spend money on coffee when the company should provide decent coffee on their own. Hey, have you talked to your manager about adjusting your workload? It won't make any difference. They don't listen to anyone here. Do you see the pattern here? Every solution was met with a yeah, but, or just an outright rejection. After a while, I realized something profound. Rebecca didn't want solutions. She just wanted to complain. The negativity itself had become comfortable for her. Allow me to break down why this behavior is so toxic. First, it's emotionally draining. Constant negativity is like secondhand smoke. Even if you're not the one being negative, being around it for a long enough period of time affects their health and well-being. Second, it creates a culture of helplessness. When you're constantly around someone who sees problems as insurmountable and rejects every solution, it starts to affect how you see your own challenges. You start thinking, well, if nothing works for them, then maybe nothing will work for me either. Third, it prevents growth. Growth requires a willingness to try new approaches, to step out of comfort zones, to accept that change is possible. Chronically negative people who reject solutions have decided, consciously or unconsciously, that staying stuck is safer than risking change. But here's what makes this particularly insidious. These people often disguise their negativity as being realistic or just venting. They'll say, I'm not being negative, I'm being practical. Or, I'm not rejecting your help, I'm just explaining why it won't work. Don't fall for it, fam. There's a big difference, a huge difference between someone who's venting about a specific frustration and is open to solutions and someone who's made complaining their full-time job and has no interest in actually improving their situation. I explained the difference in painstaking detail in episode 17 of this podcast. And if you haven't listened to it yet, I highly recommend that you do so after listening to this episode. To be clear, I've also been a help rejecter myself, so I'm not above this stuff, to be clear. During a particularly difficult period in my life, I found myself becoming that chronically negative person, rejecting help at every turn. I was stuck in a job I hated, dealing with health issues, and struggling financially. You know what I did? I complained constantly to anyone who would listen. My wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, would try to help me problem solve. Maybe you should start looking for a new job. Or, what if we looked at our budget and found ways to save money? Or, have you ever thought about seeing a therapist to work through some of this? And I shot down every single suggestion. I had an excuse for why nothing would work until one day she said something that changed everything. Shola, I love you, but I can't keep having the same conversation. Either you want to improve your situation or you want to stay miserable. But you can't keep asking me to help you while rejecting every suggestion I make. It's not fair to either of us. Oh, man, that hurt. It hurt a lot. It was the truth that I needed to hear. I realized I'd become so comfortable in my negativity that I was using it as a shield to avoid taking action. As long as I could convince myself that nothing would work, I didn't have to face the scary prospect of actually trying to change my situation and potentially failing. That realization was a turning point for me. I started accepting help. I started trying solutions even when I was scared that they wouldn't work. And slowly things started to improve for me. But here's the thing. I could only make that change because I wanted to. Nobody could force me to stop being chronically negative. I had to recognize the pattern in myself and make a conscious choice to change it. And that's the hard truth about people who reject solutions. They won't change as they want to. No amount of love, support, or brilliant solutions from you will make a slightest bit of difference if they're not ready to receive them. Your job isn't to fix them. Your job is to protect yourself from being dragged down by their energy. Now, let's talk about how to handle these relationships because chances are you're already thinking about specific people right now. If it's someone who you can distance yourself from and get a little bit of space away from them, like a colleague or an acquaintance, the solution might be to simply limit your exposure. You don't have to be cruel about it, but you can be strategic about it. Keep interactions brief. Don't engage when they start complaining. Change the subject. Remove yourself from the conversation whenever possible. If it's someone closer to you, like a family member or a longtime friend, you might need to set some explicit boundaries. You could say something like this: I care about you and I want to support you, but when you share problems with me and reject every solution that I offer, it leaves me feeling helpless and frustrated. I'm happy to listen, but I need you to be open to problem solving, or we need to find different topics to talk about. Yes, it's a difficult conversation. I get it, but it's necessary if you want to preserve your own mental health and maybe, just maybe, help them to see their pattern. And if they can't respect that boundary, then you have some real important decisions to make about how much space they get in your life. So here's your third practical kindness strategy of the episode. I want you to do what I call the solution rejection test with the people in your life. The next time someone comes to you with a problem, offer one genuine, thoughtful solution, just one. Pay attention to their response. Do they A, consider it even if they decide it's not right for them? B, appreciate your effort to help even if they're not ready to act? C, immediately shut it down with excuses? Or D, get defensive or angry that you dared suggest a solution? If the response is either C or D and you see a consistent pattern of rejection, especially if it comes with defensiveness or making you feel bad for trying to help, that's a red flag, my friend. Personally, I recommend documenting these interactions if it helps you to see the pattern more clearly. Sometimes we actually need to see it in writing to believe that it's actually happening. Remember, you can have compassion for someone's struggles while not being sucked into their struggles and having it affect your life. All right, my friend, we covered a lot of ground today in part one of our two-part series on toxic relationships. Let's recap the 3 warning signs that we discussed. First, they drain your energy every time you interact with them. After spending time with them, you feel depleted, exhausted, and like your emotional tank is running on empty. Second, they refuse to take responsibility for their actions, blame others for everything, and never genuinely apologize. They've made deflection and excuse-making an art form. Third, they're chronically negative, pessimistic, and reject any attempt at finding solutions. These folks are married to their misery and they're not interested in filing for divorce. And remember your practical takeaways. Complete your energy audit to identify relationships that consistently drain you. Do the accountability assessment to evaluate whether someone can take responsibility for their actions. And third, conduct a solution rejection test to see if someone is genuinely open to help or just looking for an audience with their negativity. In next week's episode, part 2 of the series, we'll explore 3 more critical warning signs of toxic relationships. Before we wrap up, I want to say something really important. Recognizing toxicity in your relationships isn't about judging others or being unkind. It's about being honest about what's happening, really happening, and making informed choices about how you invest your precious time and energy. Sometimes we need to make the very difficult, but also life-affirming decision to love someone from a distance. If that's a decision that you've decided to make, please know that I'll be here on this journey, here on this podcast, sending you love every step of the way. Thank you for joining me for part 1 of the special 2-part series. And remember, we're only halfway there, fam. Next week, I'll address the remaining 3 signs of a toxic relationship. Until we get there, though, I hope this episode gave you some clarity about relationships that might be affecting your peace, your well-being, and your sanity. This is your host, Shola Richards, aka Brother Teresa, and you now know that kindness can't be weak because you just experienced the strength of the Kindest, Extremist podcast. Until next time, my friend, the journey to a kinder world continues. Thank you for listening to the Kindest, Extremist podcast. I really hope that you enjoyed this episode, and I have one favor to ask. If you could kindly hit the subscribe button, leave a rating and a review, not only would that be incredibly kind, but by doing so, you're actively playing a role in growing this movement and ideally getting us one step closer to creating a kinder world. I hope to see you next week for another episode of the Kindest Extremist podcast. Bye for now.